Hi guys, this is Nitin and I welcome you to my startup podcast channel Jazar Audio where we share real stories with real learning. So my guest speaker this time is Arman Kapoor. Arman is the upcoming investor in the VC firm January Capital, which focuses on early stage tech investments in Southeast Asia and India. So Arman would be giving his valuable insights on certain characteristics or prerequisites before fundraising. He will also talk about how pre-revenue startups should prepare for fundraising, and finally share some success stories, that is the startups we invested in and the potential reasons behind investing in them. Hi Arman, welcome to Jazar Audio and thank you for talking to us.
Hey Nitin, thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
So let's start with what are the 3 or 4 characteristics which every startup should meet so as to attract the prospective investors?
Yeah, I think over time I've sort of developed a personal framework borrowed sort of from others as well. But I would say four key points are quite critical, irrespective of stage and especially so for early stage startups. One would be sort of having a clear idea of the problem that they're trying to solve. I think that's sort of the critical step number one. And at point where I think most startups fail is that they don't go about solving a pain point that's actually valid. So first, validating that this pain point does exist is critical. Number two, I think how big is this pain point? That is usually also gives you an idea about your addressable market and how big your market opportunity is, which is definitely something that investors care about and venture back. Number three, I think, is if you've validated that this pain point does exist, how are you going about solving it? What's your solution? I think typically it falls within three buckets. It's usually, price or convenience, or in general, I think quality. That these are the three sort of main criteria that startups wish to solve valid pain points aim to sort of score well on. Existing to relation incumbent stage startups is why are you the one best equipped to solve this pain point? That's quite critical because at an early stage you're really backing the founder and you're backing any sort of business. You're backing the belief and the ability of the founder to go about and solve this pain point through his or her approach. I think these four are, I would say, the most critical points, and it's sort of a building blocks approach that I think startups do to go about making sure that they have a viable solution, and I think that's something that really helps with startups because usually what's in investors' minds as well when they're applying their own work as to what could be a potential early investment for them.
All right. So, what are the prerequisites or must have before the founders start pitching to the investors?
Sure. I think one is definitely, a demonstrated path to action. When you are sort of tapping external funding, there has to be a reason for it. I think that's like you've gone about trying to come up with an idea and you've either found product market fit or you have a sort of an MVP that you want to attack it with. And that's why you're looking at an external capital raise to go about to supercharge your efforts achieving these goals. I think that's really, really critical and point number one. In terms of others, I think it's also, while I don't think investors really look for the exact laser focus on what the future is going to look like, I think it is good to have sort of an idea about why this capital that you're going to take from invest is going to help you achieve your next, your product roadmap or your traction that you want to achieve with this. And having an ability of how to go to market, I think, is pretty critical at that stage if you are sort of in that zone and that stage of your life. I think that's something that investors look at pretty cleanly because it's their money that they're putting on the line. So I would say that having sort of a go to market strategy or an idea about it is pretty critical even at an early stage. Obviously, it's a rapidly evolving ecosystem. This year has taught us that anything is possible. So I don't think investors are going to penalize if it doesn't go according to that exact roadmap, but at least having a vision for it and the demonstrated ability to think critically about kind of the important. As obviously it depends on sort of the stage of the startup as well as the startup matures and you're looking at A or B finance. You do have to back that up with usually forecast and how your metrics are going to look like from this point to the other, and have the conviction to convince us that you are going to make do on even if it doesn't sort of pan out exactly that way. I think having the ability to say that this is where the pipeline has come from and this is where the stage of the company becomes quite critical as a startup matures.
That's great. And how should the pre revenue startups prepare for fundraising?
Yeah, sure. I think, and this is, I get why it's such a popular question, because there's so many now in the market looking at that early round of funding, which is what we've seen this year as well. I think it's definitely within the scope of domain of most venture capital firms. Even some of the big ones now are going in that early, where it is pre-revenue, and you're really backing the founder and sort of the idea of this product before it actually generates revenue. One I would say is that if you are sort of in that phase where you want to, if you're pre-revenue and you're just sort of in the ideation and product stage, I think it's okay to sort of focus on those issues and speak about how you're going to achieve product market fit and sort of scale something like GMV, etc., before actually monetize. But I would say that it's, since revenue is really that lever that you need to pull to sort of accelerate and raise further rounds and eventually generate profitability. I think it is good to also have an idea in mind, at least about how you're going to go about only relying on getting traction and then depending on further sort of ancillary opportunities or embedded opportunities. Sometimes I think points to a lack of focus. That can be an add-on, but I think it is good to have sort of at least one revenue stream in mind about how you're going to actually go about monetizing product, because that's, at the end of the day, I think at some point everyone will have to resort to that, and that question will be asked. So I think it's critical to go ahead with that, but at the same time, it's not sort of going to be the main focus of an early round. It's really about showing how your product and sort of key to win out this market, and revenue is really sort of a consequence. So if you can sort of give that conviction to the investor the best way possible, I think they'll be okay with backing up as there have.
Great. Finally, can you share some success stories of the startups that you funded and the potential reasons behind investing in them?
Sure. Yeah, well, I can give a couple of examples, mainly in Southeast Asia. So one would definitely be EMQ. So basically, in short, Q is cross-border payment settlement infrastructure platform that enables sort of people from different geographies to transfer payments quite easily. So they're not the consumer-facing app. They actually are the ones who develop the back-end infrastructure that allows seamless payments across borders and sort of same-day delivery and netting. So that's I think quite a valuable proposition, given and sort of the focus that they have is mainly in migrant workers in different geographies. So clearly that's a pain point that has been felt for a while now. Most of these guys have had to rely on things like Western Union, etc., which charge quite exorbitant, and obviously given their level of income, that's not really easy for them. So consumer facing apps such as sort of Alipay, Tencent, etc., WeChat, they have the front end app which enables them to do this, but obviously there needs to be someone at the back end enabling a seamless transfer, and that's what we saw he did. Given that it's a bit of a later stage company, at Series B, obviously traction was important, and the fact that they had sort of this great traction from C side, I think really gave us conviction that this is a valid pain point, and they're going about it in the right way, locking different geographies, going to geographies where there are a large population of migrant workers and them transfer money back pretty slow. That was one. Number two I can speak about is BukuKas. So BukuKas is essentially, if I should give a one-line summary of it, it's sort of the Khata book for Indonesia. So very similar, pain point in terms of helping Kirana stores, which are called the warungs in Asia, manage their bookkeeping and digital transactions effectively. That's something that they write on paper. They don't have a good sort of sense of where the money is going, especially when there's credit involved. And BukuKas is sort of enabling them to manage their finance flows pretty easily. And I think that's something that's really valuable. Small SMEs all over Indonesia, there are 60 million, so definitely a big market opportunity. Again, so going back to my earlier point, it's a pre-revenue business, but it's one that needs that sort of traction first, sort of educating the market about the viability of the app and how it's them before it can sort of go monetize. So that's
Awesome. With this, we have reached at the end of this podcast. Aman, thank you so much for talking to us, and it was a pleasure to have you on board to Desire Audio.
Thanks, Nathan. Thanks so much for having me, and best of luck. Thank you.
Are you a founder of an early stage startup and looking to raise funding? Get your startup investor ready before even you start pitching to your prospective investors. For know-how, please visit www.jazaro.in. That is www.jasaro.in.
Lastly, I want to thank all the listeners who took their valuable time to listen to this podcast. Keep rocking, be safe, and don't forget to share.